Hello, fellow reading warriors and my friends at Read Fort Worth. Thank you so much for your commitment to making sure every single student is a successful reader. We know that if you can't read, you can't learn. And if you can't read and learn, your prospects for a successful life are pretty dim. So thank you for your leadership, Superintendent Scribner, Mayor Price, our Texas 2036 board member, Matt Rose, and especially your leader, Elizabeth Brands. So appreciate your commitment to this important work. Our state will not prosper, nor will the individuals in it, without making sure that every single one of them is a really strong and effective reader. So thank you for your good work. Carry on.
To borrow a phrase from Secretary Margaret Spellings, welcome reading warriors. And thank you for your interest in Read Fort Worth's Strengthening Literacy Power in Partnerships program that was previously recorded in November of 2020. I also want to thank Dr. Scribner for joining us in person at our program, and for Mayor Price for her continued support of Read Fort Worth. Mayor Price was scheduled to be with us in person that day, but was unable to join due to her husband Tom testing positive for COVID-19 the day before taping. Mayor Price did share the following statement that she wrote for me to read to all of you. While I am so disappointed that I could not join you for the stakeholder meeting, I am grateful to each of you for showing your commitment to Read Fort Worth. The work of Read Fort Worth has never been more critical, as our students, teachers, and families are facing unprecedented challenges in the face of this pandemic. But in true Fort Worth fashion, Read Fort Worth has stepped up to repeatedly meet the needs of our community. From the front porch visits to the technical assistance provided for remote learning, the critical work of Read Fort Worth could not be possible without the involvement of our stakeholders. I look forward to thanking all of you in person soon enough, but in the meantime, please accept my heartfelt appreciation for your support of this incredible organization. Thank you, Mayor Price, for your kind words. For everyone watching, we want you to know that Superintendent Scribner and I are sitting 6 feet apart, and we are following all of the school's COVID protocols. It might not appear that way on the video, but we want you to know that we are practicing all safety measures. Thank you again to all of our supporters, volunteers, and partners whose support is critical in our continued success. We appreciate all of you joining us as we share the strategic priorities for the future of Read Fort Worth. As we get started, let's talk a little bit about where Read Fort Worth stands this year, and we will do so by focusing on our foundational pillars of work: increasing school readiness, reducing chronic absenteeism, preventing summer slide, counteracting family stressors, and elevating teacher quality. Lastly, before schools went virtual due to COVID-19 in March, average daily attendance at 8 Fort Worth ISD elementary schools where Read Fort Worth held attendance pilots averaged 96.4%. This is a significant and promising number that reflects the efforts of administrators, teachers, parents, and students. Now we will jump into our program. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your continued support of Read Fort Worth and for walking alongside us in our commitment to this important goal for kids in our community.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming here to Van Zandt Gwynn Elementary to conduct this conversation. And I too would like to share my thoughts and support to Mayor Price and her husband, and hope that he has a quick recovery. So with regard to Fort Worth ISD prior to the pandemic, and as we remember, that happened in March, just prior to our week spring break. When we came back and found out that we would not be returning to school, we probably were one of the most disappointed districts in Texas. We had some indicators that really, from our perspective, were very predictive, and we were confident that they would have demonstrated increase in student achievement across the board. For example, our pre-K students, Fort Worth ISD students who attended a pre-K in our district, The percentage of them who were on track in the kindergarten entry assessment, we saw an increase there from 65 to 74%. Our MAP reading fluency, which is a nationally normed test, we saw on-grade scoring with the greatest increase in those kindergartners at 24%. So we were very encouraged by that. These benchmark tests are aligned as strong predictors, as I said, not only at early literacy, but in all grade levels, elementary, middle school, and high school, all subject areas, and at all performance levels of approaches, meets, and masters on the STAR test. Our English language learners also saw increased achievement, and again, we were very we understood obviously the need with the pandemic to postpone the STAR test, but look forward to some sense of normalcy in the future. I know this spring there's a debate going on in terms of should the STAR test be more focused on assessment or accountability based on creating a new baseline given the amount of time that we've lost in learning. But we're excited with the upward trajectory that we're on, and certainly attribute a great deal of that to our hard work of our teachers, but also to our partners like Read Fort Worth.
Thank you. And we know that the district made Herculean efforts when schools did close in the middle of March to continue that upward progress through the spring with distance learning. Can you give an update on the strides that have been made in distance learning and any updates to share there?
Well, yes, as I said, it was March the 6th was the last day that Fort Worth ISD students were in school. Our 80,000 student strong district were in a school building like this one in what we would all think of as traditional education. Following the spring break, during the spring break, many of us were on the phone a number of times with our county health officials. The decision ultimately to have 1 week extended period of time with students not in school. Then it was 2 weeks, and then ultimately it was the entire semester as determined by Governor Abbott. We quickly pivoted to a virtual instruction, and it was bumpy. It was not smooth for Fort Worth ISD, nor really for any district nationwide. Our teachers, even our 20 and 30-year veterans, they became first-year teachers again for the first time in their careers, teaching fully virtually from their homes. Remember, we were at a stay-at-home order at that time. So we learned a lot in the spring. We planned a great deal in the summer. And when the board decided to engage with the 4 weeks of transition period of continued virtual come fall semester, we actually had a much better result. The feedback was much more positive. We called it our virtual 2.0. I can speak personally in our own home. Our 7th grader got off to a great start in September with the virtual program. After that, we provided choice to our parents and began to phase in first with the students in pre-K, kinder, and first grade. That happened on October the 5th. Basically students who were new to a school building, so our earliest learners, our 6th graders, our 9th graders, and then additional grades began to phase in until we got to the end of October, when all students had the choice to come to school either in person or virtually, and we're continuing with that same protocol today.
I've heard you talk a lot about this as well, that when schools transitioned from in-person learning to a virtual platform in the spring, that the access to technology devices and internet became even more critical than ever before. And those things became, back to school supplies, like used to be on our back to school supply list of lined paper and number 2 pencils. But now devices and internet became ubiquitous with Crayola markers and rulers that were the former school supply lists. And Read Fort Worth partnered with Fort Worth ISD and Facebook and AT&T to work on getting 6,000 mobile hotspots out to homes. And we really applaud your team and the surveying that they did of families to ask families what their needs were, so that we knew that those 6,000 hotspots were going to families that didn't have home internet access. In the context of the spring, when everyone was looking for hotspots, it was certainly a Herculean effort to not only secure that quantity of devices, but put the funding and all the pieces in place let alone distribute those when we were again in a shelter-in-place and remote kind of environment. And that was really a critical piece this spring that those kids will continue to have this fall, knowing that there are long-term, more sustainable options that are being worked on in tandem. We also really saw too in the spring that the normal delivery systems for kids and families wasn't going to be the same, that kids were not learning in classrooms anymore, they were learning remotely, and how we got resources to kids and families, we needed to shift and innovate as well. And Fort Worth ISD, your team stepped up, working with us on the porch visit task force to use data to identify elementary school students in 4 different pyramids that could really benefit from somebody showing up on their front porch. And we'll give a nod to the mayor here today because she was certainly an inspiration for that. I've heard the mayor call Fort Worth a community of front porches. And so we literally put that into action with your team and our community partners from organizations across Fort Worth that went in trios of 3 people to visit the homes of over 1,000 kids, delivering to them instructional resources, basic needs support, and IT assistance, knowing that there are just some kids that need somebody to show up on their front porch, and that's the best way of getting to them and accessing them. And in addition to that, we wanted to reach kind of a broader swath of the community and set up 6 driving carnivals where families could drive through in their car, socially distanced, and receive those same items, really trying to bring a spirit of fun and joy and kindness. There were jugglers on stilts and cotton candy and balloons that were handed out. And we had over 5,000 cars that came through those, visiting even more families, representing every elementary school really across Fort Worth that we had families showing up on. And we also had about 5,000 backpacks that were handed out that had literacy materials in them. They were co-developed with your team to make sure that each backpack was developmentally and academically appropriate for the age and grade of the kid picking it up. And I have to tell a story. I don't know if you've heard this one or not yet, but I was staffing one of the tents at the drive-in carnivals, and a car drove by, little boy, all the kids in the back seat were getting their balloons and cotton candy. And this little boy from the back seat yells up to the front of the car, and he said, I have so much joy. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, how is that possible? It's August, it's summer in Texas. And he said that he just felt like it felt to him like Christmas to receive books to take home to his family. And I know that that's the spirit that you are trying to create in every one of your schools and classrooms and libraries just like this across the district, is a joy and love of reading, in addition to those fundamental skills that kids really need to comprehend and use literacy as that tool in the classroom and in their life. So I wanted to make sure to share that story with you.
That's great.
I'm not sure it's one that you've heard.
That's great.
We understand that the district is working on some longer-term Wi-Fi solutions for kids and families, and that partnership has come to fruition with the district and the city. And we were hoping that you could give us an update on kind of where that stands and what you hope to achieve.
Well, sure. We are really excited about not only the partnership with the city and Fort Worth ISD, but also with the Rainwater Foundation and the leadership that's really coming out of our philanthropic community here in Fort Worth and our business community. Our board, they quickly pivoted and authorized us to invest in connectivity and in devices for our students. We had historically provided a one-to-one, a Chromebook to every student from 6th grade through the 12th grade. Obviously, that program was a great investment, about $13 million, and we need to refresh those computers about every 3 years. Well, since COVID has hit us, the board actually doubled that number, and we've invested $26 million thus far to get to a one-to-one ratio. In fact, just the other night, when we canvassed the votes from our TRE, I know we're going to talk about that in a little while, those additional funds, the board also authorized us to purchase an additional 24,000. So we really are moving fast and want to keep those promises that we made and implement a one-to-one ratio with devices. Now, regarding connectivity, that's a larger conversation. We communicated with leaders in our community the need to partner. We have zip codes, many of which are in East Fort Worth and Southeast Fort Worth and some portions of South Fort Worth, that have a third to a half of the households with children, so homes in which our students live, that do not have reliable, robust Wi-Fi access. So we want to partner. I know that the city made a great step with regard to their neighborhood improvement initiative. We want to kind of connect with that and expand that. And I know Rainwater is going to help quarterback that effort. Maddie Parker, who is now leading the Cradle to Career Fort Worth effort. I think that is there's a great deal of synergy there. And when we talk about these challenges, they really are hitting all of us. When we talk about making Fort Worth a great place to live and a better place to live for all of our residents in all 209 square miles of Fort Worth ISD, we recognize that many of those same zip codes that struggle with internet connectivity, there's the intersection of many other, social challenges, healthcare access, housing, homelessness, things like food deserts and transportation, jobs, and criminal justice issues. So really, this is a great opportunity when we talk about collective impact to get all of the social service agencies, our business community, our faith community, our philanthropic community to pull together and help those communities so that we can help our students. And I think Read Fort Worth, as one of those members of this collective impact effort, really has helped us facilitate this conversation so that more people around our city recognize the importance of schools in our current success, but also in our future success.
Absolutely. And I think I'm getting this right in saying that as I understand the way that this community Wi-Fi is being built out, it's being built out in a way that while you might start in some initial zip codes, that the structures are being put in place that it can be replicated in other zip codes on a quick timeline, even other ISDs, and possibly as a model for other cities as well.
Yes, absolutely. Maddie Parker is quick to remind us, not only Read Fort Worth, but also Tarrant to and through the post-secondary effort, that these are county-wide efforts. But I think it's right, and I think it is smart to start with the largest ISD with the highest percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged, 85% of our student population. We have great need, and I think by investing in our students, we will see the greatest return on investment, not only for our city, but for the entire county, really in the region.
You know as well as I do that enrollment and attendance is getting a lot of conversation across the county, state, even nationally, and that we're hearing across Texas that ISDs are averaging 4 to 6% lower enrollment than a year ago now. Can you talk a little bit about where Fort Worth ISD is with that and kind of the split between kids that are learning remotely and kids that are learning in classrooms?
So I serve as the chair of the Texas Urban Council, which is an organization made up of what we call the Big Eight, the large districts in Texas, Houston and Dallas and Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, all of the big city districts. And each one of us are seeing, as you said, about a 4 to 6% drop in enrollment. Fort Worth ISD is about 4.6%. Almost 2/3 of that, though, is pre-K and kindergarten. In the state of Texas, preschool and kindergarten are not required. That's not mandatory. So I think parents in this environment, the pandemic, are making decisions about keeping their students home. I understand that as a parent and loving our children and wanting to keep them safe. But I am concerned that we are going to see a drop in time in learning time. We remember when we look at the data from Katrina hurricane. We recognize that it took those students about 4 years to catch back up to where they would have been. So when we talk about coming back to some sense of normalcy, we're all very hopeful about vaccinations and getting those out, and to our teachers and to our students and to our community. I do envision a scenario in which when we do come back For example, here at Van Zandt Gwynn, there will be in-person instruction from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, but then we'll have to make up that lost ground in the afternoons, in the evenings, on Saturdays. That can happen in person, individual or small group tutoring, but can also happen virtually as we continue to get better with regard to our instruction virtually. In Fort Worth, you asked for the percentages of parental choice. And right now, 47% of our student population, as I said, roughly 80,000 students, 47% of them have chosen in-person instruction. 53% of the students are receiving instruction virtually. With 143 schools, a very diverse student population socioeconomically, but also with race and ethnicity, we see that those percentages not being equally distributed across all 143 schools. Some schools have a higher percentage of in-person, and some schools have a much lower percentage of students in person. With the number of cases increasing, the community spread across our county and across the district, we want to monitor that and ensure if things change that we're ready to react. Our parents have the option at the end of every 6-week period to either choose to continue virtually or go in person or vice versa. They can change their status. But one thing I really do want to reiterate, we are very serious about our safety protocols. And I know there was some conversation, not only here locally, but also nationally, about extracurricular activities and athletics. And I would just assert that in our public schools, we are confident that they are safe places to be. Our school activities are safe places to be. And it is that community spread that really is, I think, affecting the school from the outside in versus from the inside out.
Absolutely. I think that, with the shift from in-person to remote learning, whether it's the election, the tax ratification that we'll talk to in a minute, it seems like folks are more informed than ever about our public education system. Are there other information that you would like to share with the audience today to make them aware of what's happening in our public schools?
Well, first thing I'd like for all of us to kind of take a step back and reflect on is that schools matter. Schools are important. In every conversation about reopening society, reopening the economy, we now, I think, are recognizing the importance that schools play in the larger system. Teachers are essential. Teachers matter. Teachers deserve respect and deserve to be supported, and we cannot do this without teachers. But irrespective of this very emotional time, we're focused on social and emotional learning as a result of COVID. We also, though, are keeping our eye on the ball and monitoring our data. Our focus, our board focus, their evaluation of me remains solely on student achievement outcomes, whether it be early learning in literacy or early learning in mathematics or college, career, and military readiness. We're focused on continuing with our professional development now. We're learning how to do that virtually. Focus on the knowledge, science of teaching reading, the knowledge and implementation. We understand that it's important to help our youngest students understand words and word parts, oral reading fluency, comprehension, writing, all of the aspects. And that work remains irrespective of the pandemic, whether it's happening in person or if it's happening virtually.
To segue from that, I've heard you talk about education as an economic development, economic workforce piece. And when we look at national statistics and trends related to that, things that show students reading below grade level by third grade are 4 times less likely than their peers to go on to graduate from high school, and how that then can correlate with earning up to 40% less than other workers with a bachelor's degree, costing our society almost $260,000 in lost earnings, taxes, and productivity. Mm-hmm. As the first job I ever had was a classroom teacher, and to think about how a child as young as 7 or 8 years old that is in third grade, that we're able to make such a dire prediction about their future if they're not able to read at that age, both their future in school but also in life. I mean, it really tugs at my heartstrings. It's enough to make you to stop and pause. And curious to hear from you that these statistics really build a case for a quality public education being an issue that needs to impact all of us. And what are the opportunities here for the business community to support public education?
Well, first, I think those statistics that you cite really are representative across the nation, and this is a complex predicament that we have been in for many, many years. In fact, as the chair of the Texas Urban Council, we invited Ron Ferguson, the economist from Harvard, who's focused on early childhood education. Think about that. MIT-educated economist is focused on birth to 3 years old and reminds us that the majority of brain development is happening between birth and 2 years old, birth and 3 years old. So we really have to change the way we look at school improvement, education reform, if you will. It is a collective effort. We do have to help parents recognize when we provide them with books, those books are not to be put on a shelf to be saved until the student goes to school. Those books are to be used immediately and look, sing, point, and really identify those kinds of patterns in students' minds. To your point about education and the economy being inextricably linked. I mean, we're blessed in Fort Worth that we have a community that recognizes that education is economic development, that our students are assets to be invested in. Our student population is rich in diversity, and that's an asset, that's positive. Where our students are resilient, where they're collaborative, where they're bilingual, where they're bicultural, where our community understands the importance of investing in them. I just think that from the business community, understanding that irrespective of the different educational frameworks, whether that be private, parochial, charter, whatever, 85 to 90% of our students are going to come to the ISD, and so we have to, if we're going to move society in a positive direction, we have to continue to recognize and invest in those large systems and double down on what works. We are not perfect, but neither is anyone else when it comes to educating students who are economically disadvantaged and language minority. But what we have to do is identify those programs that work, double down on those, and learn what to do, what to keep doing, and what to stop doing, and what programs we need to sunset and reallocate those dollars. In Fort Worth ISD, we've implemented the school performance framework, where we've tiered our schools, and our top schools, our A and B schools, they've earned autonomy. They've demonstrated that they can do good things. We want to make sure they're helping all students because there are economically disadvantaged and language minority students in those populations as well. But if they've earned some autonomy, we can redirect the resources that had historically been attached to those schools and double down on those communities that we talked about earlier with generational poverty. Particularly in this pandemic, I know I'm going on a little bit too much, but I just want to reiterate. I thank you and thank Read Fort Worth and thank Cradle to Career Fort Worth, because we need to at this time double down on public education. We cannot allow a global health crisis to become a generational educational crisis. As we see those disparities continue if we do not intervene.
I think your comment on the need to double down is powerful, and that coupled too with the comments about the pipeline of our early education system into our ISD, and how kids are showing up, as Dr. Ferguson talks about, kindergarten ready.
Right.
There are some powerful themes there connected with that, the strength of the early education system that we have here in Tarrant County, and how we create a powerful handoff between that and the ISD,
Sure.
and those community-wide goals that we have for all of our kids,
Right.
And how we're creating a seamless transition.
Sure.
So I appreciate those points that are made, and I know you've referenced Proposition A, the tax ratification election, and I know our audience is excited to hear more about that with a close passage of that. Congratulations to you in the district. And what does that mean to the district and our community, the passage of that?
I mean, it was close, but it was also the largest win margin of any school election in Tarrant County. So we appreciate our voters' investment and recognition that public education is economic development. We saw several other school questions go down and not pass. We saw our neighbor next door in Arlington pass by 300 votes. I think the 6,700 vote margin that we saw was closer than we would have liked. But again, during this pandemic, during a very difficult time, we certainly wished that the circumstances were different, and I think our win margin would have been even greater. As I said, it was the largest in Tarrant County. But I think moving forward, we need to just understand the monumental work and the importance of that vote. In fact, on Monday night when we canvassed the votes, the board authorized the purchase of another 23,000 Chromebooks. As I stated, we were already on an upward trajectory. That election allowed us to focus in 3 specific areas: in teacher compensation, in health, safety, and security, and connectivity and devices. On the teacher compensation piece, we think 2 things. We think being able to recruit and retain by improving the salary schedule is one piece, rising tide lifting all boats. But we also think, and more importantly, incentivizing our best teachers to work with our students who are in the greatest need. We understand that it'll take some time to implement the teacher incentive allotment program, that the state actually will trigger some dollars to Fort Worth ISD, and we can enhance and accelerate those dollars with what our voters provided. We felt it was a pretty reasonable request too, because prior to the TRE, out of the 21 districts in Tarrant County, we sat in the 19th position. So if we measure our investment in our students by our school tax rate, we actually were 19th out of 21st. And with passage of this election, we moved from the 19th place to the middle, 13th. So not the top 10, heck, not even the top 5. But we think being in the middle of the bell curve, really targeting those dollars intelligently in 3 baskets, as I said: the teacher compensation, safety, health, and security, connectivity and devices. That will allow us to incentivize our best teachers to work with our students in the greatest need, and as we roll out our teacher incentive allotment, to be able to accelerate and enhance that. We're excited about this, and thankfully we will never have to ask for a TRE to our voters ever again under the current law. So we're excited about that. We can get to work.
Well, I'm going to lift up the piece of the TRE related to teacher quality. That has certainly been a topic that has been of interest to the Read Fort Worth board. And I don't think there's another way to say it except for that our teachers are rock stars. Yeah, and if we did not appreciate and value our teachers before, I believe you said it was March 7th when schools closed, there is no excuse for not appreciating and valuing them now, as every single parent became a teacher, and classrooms were transitioned into living rooms and couches. I think that it is now more than ever, we have greater appreciation for our teachers as parents took on that role of homeschooler and parent. Yeah. And so again, I think there's no other way to say it except for that our teachers are rock stars, and we can look at national data which shows us that teachers are the strongest correlated factor to a kid's academic success in a school setting, more so than the facilities in the school, more so than the school leader. But we also don't even need to look that far. We can look right here in our local community to see countless examples of excellent teachers stepping up. We have examples of teachers who created, virtual graduations for their kids, who walked with us to visit the families, 1,000 families this summer. Every house that we visited had 3 people that knocked on the front doors, and in those trios included a Fort Worth ISD staff, in many cases a teacher, handing out those instructional materials. And they did this in the face of a global pandemic, when there was a lot at stake, both for the safety of their kids, but also themselves and their families. And the feat of just transitioning in-person learning to a virtual format, that is a feat that has never been undertaken in our national education system ever. And we had teachers that had to step up and be innovative. And in my perspective, there is no greater example of what leadership looks like than when you step up when things are challenging. So we just give our deep appreciation for all of the teachers and really lift up the piece of the TRE related to teacher quality, knowing that we need to hold our teachers accountable for being excellent, and then we need to reward them when they are. And the last thing I'll say about our excellent teachers is when you walk into this school today and you see teachers and kids in masks and the safety protocols that are in place to make sure that every child remains healthy and every teacher remains healthy, your heart really goes out to everything that the teachers are doing to make sure that kids can be in classrooms learning, knowing that this is a very rich and robust place for them to make up any regression or loss that we might have had in the spring, and that they are showing up and putting those procedures in place to first make sure that their kids are safe and healthy and they themselves are safe and healthy, and then providing that academic learning experience here in person.
Absolutely.
As you think about what we have learned in virtual learning, what do you see as critical next steps for the district?
Well, again, as I said, I don't think it's going away. I mean, I think we have a great opportunity to pivot and change the way we do education moving forward. We are not going back to the way things were prior to the March 6th or 7th, as we said. What I think will happen is as we are all getting better in using technology and communicating and listening to each other and virtually, that will be a part of schooling. When we talk about the importance of differentiating instruction, talk about all of the resources that are out there, whether it be the Khan Academy or language learning. I do think that we can get the best of both worlds. The in-person interaction is never going to be something that we move away from. I think we can enhance it, because obviously the socialization, the social and emotional learning. One piece that I also wanted to thank you for in the front porch visits, our equity and excellence staff participated in that, but so too did social workers. So when we interacted with families, there was an opportunity to hopefully discover if there was a need or someone in crisis, and we certainly want to support that. Additionally, the food services staff who stepped up. You talk about stepping up, serving over 1 million meals through the spring and summer. It really was something that humbles all of us in terms of the commitment. But I do think we've learned a lot. We'll continue to use technology more strategically, and it will be an opportunity. So we don't have to catch up over 4 years like happened in New Orleans with the Katrina. That we can shorten that period of time and invest in our infrastructure and our instructional strategies so that we can get our students back up to speed as quickly as possible.
I'm glad you mentioned the emphasis on getting our kids back up to speed as quickly as possible and connecting that with the porch visits. We are out there again this week visiting those families with the social workers that you mentioned, making sure that we're continuing to serve, again, kids and families like where they need us. And sometimes right now with this pandemic, they literally need us on their front porches and in their homes.
Right.
And so that work continues this fall, as we know that some of those needs continue, and we need to get in front of them so that we aren't in a situation where we're still dealing with the consequences of this years down the road. Well, the district, you in particular, have been working with Read Fort Worth since Read Fort Worth was founded in 2016, so almost 4 years now. And I know that you and I are both excited to announce that for the first time in 4 years that Read Fort Worth and Fort Worth ISD are partnering on what we're calling our Literacy Accord. We've never had this in the history of our 4-year partnership, and it's really a statement of our recommitment and determination, and as you said, doubling down on academic performance indicators for kids, particularly third grade reading. And the document outlines the roles of Read Fort Worth, the roles of the districts, our roles of responsibility, the goals we want to accomplish, and mutual accountability, as we both have this common ambitious goal of ensuring that every child can read on grade level by the end of third grade. So I know that we're excited to announce that today, and we'll be signing that document in partnership with you and your team to, again, as a recommitment to our dedication and determination to third grade reading. And as far as what's next for Read Fort Worth, we understand that this is still a time when people are feeling a lot of uncertainty about the impact of COVID on our systems and on our children. And while we don't want to do anything to minimize that and the obstacles that we still face and that we're still overcoming and that leaders are stepping up to find solutions for, we certainly see a lot of hope. And I think that you outlined a lot of examples today of this, Superintendent Scribner. And we see hope in the community partners, over 40 of them, that stepped up to walk with us and make phone calls ahead of visiting families and walk with us to the front porches, who stood in tents on a weekend in August in our drive-in carnivals, handing out over 5,000 literacy instructional packets and social emotional needs, signing up over 1,200 families to receive text messages every week that had grade and developmentally appropriate messages for them and their family. We see community partners who are innovating in countless ways, who are saying we are going to build what kids and families need. If they need food, we will figure out how to get it to them. If they need a phone call to remember to enroll in school, we will do that. These community partners are shifting their work, constantly finding ways to say yes, that we will support Fort Worth and we will support our children in increasing attendance, enrollment, and student performance outcomes. We also see hope in our teachers. We've referenced them a couple of times today in the work that they did this spring, a feat never accomplished before, of shifting from in-person learning to virtual formats, to continuing to stay in touch with those kids all spring, and then showing up again this fall with all the safety and health precautions in place to make sure that in-person learning can remain this way for the entire school year. And we also see so many examples of hope in our parents. We know that our families and parents here at the district and across Fort Worth had to step up to not only be the caregiver of their children, but also the teacher of their children this spring in particular. And we have great appreciation for our parents. And I know that the district and Read Fort Worth share this goal of making sure that we are listening to parents and that we are responding to what it is that they need. And an example of this that I know that we have shared with you before is when we made phone calls to these families this summer and we asked them what it is that we needed, and we showed up on their front porch with those items. We had people who were complete strangers saying how kind it was that we as Fort Worth should listen to them. We came to their house with what they need and we followed through on that. And I think that is just an example of the times that we are in, where a stranger showing that act of kindness can really go a long way. And it shows the power of listening to our parents and making sure that we are co-developing and innovating alongside of them, knowing that they are the primary educators and partners with us in this work. Moving forward, Read Fort Worth is committed to our attendance work. And we referenced that in-person strategies last year, and this year we're continuing those in-person strategies, but we're adding virtual attendance strategies as well. We know that for families who have chosen to learn remotely, we need to make sure that those kids are attending at the same rate and pace as their in-person peers are in their classrooms. We're also boosting our efforts in our porch visits. I mentioned that we're up and running with those again this week as we continue that work of making sure that the whole family is cared for, especially when you're working with kids the age that we are at Read Fort Worth. We know that it's not just the child who's getting up every day and logging into the computer or getting themselves to school, it's the family unit as well. And if that family unit needs strengthening and supporting, only then can their child learn at maximum capacity. And we'll continue the work that we have done with our porch visits and carnivals and attendance work to analyze student-level data for kindergarten through third graders across the district, and to look at that data disaggregated by school and race and zip code and shift strategies to where the data is telling us that we can get the most impact and where kids need us the most. We also, in this spirit of moving forward with confidence and a redetermination and a doubling down commitment towards third grade reading, we are excited to announce today the Read Fort Worth and Don Baber's Reading Awards program in partnership with our corporate partner, Solomon Bruce Consulting. Together with them and Fort Worth ISD and Read Fort Worth, we are going to be working on increasing attendance and enrollment rates across the same elementary schools that we visited with our porch visits this summer. Many of you may know Mr. Don Babers, who recently passed away. He was a member of our Read Fort Worth board and a friend and an ardent champion of families and children. He lived a life of service and deep commitment for the lives of those in his community, And his professional life is an example of that, as well as his personal life, where professionally he was the regional director for Fort Worth's HUD department, and he also served in this role for a 5-state region that included Texas and Arkansas, Oklahoma, and I'm missing one, maybe Kansas. Closer to home again, Mr. Babers lived that example of stewardship in many volunteering capacities, and he joined the Read Fort Worth board in 2018. And in my most recent conversations with him, talking to him about the work that Read Fort Worth is doing for kids and families in Fort Worth, he made sure to mention how important it is that we are serving the whole family. With his work in HUD and housing, he saw firsthand that kids who do not have safe and secure housing, families that do not have safe and secure housing, it's very difficult for them to learn when they're struggling and stressed by their basic needs. And his most recent conversation to me expressed his joy in working with Read Fort Worth, and that he got to be a part of mitigating those stressors on families that result in kids having more barriers to learn than we would like for any of them to have. So we want to honor him today with naming this reward program after him. And we look forward to telling the district and our school partners more about that. And we just have a deep thanks for Mr. Babers and his family, and for all the contributions that they have made to our city to make it a brighter place. Before we close today, there were a few questions that came in from our guests that they were sent in via email. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those. And one of them was on the topic of parents and the importance of parents in our partnership between the district and Read Fort Worth. And I wanted to give you a moment to talk about the work that the district is doing with parents in our mutual goal and respect for the role that they play in our success.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. And in the spirit of taking things that work to scale, many people know about our program at Manuel Jara Elementary that was run by the former principal there, Marta Plata. She's been promoted to taking that parent university program that existed there on the north side to our executive director of parent partnerships. Many districts in Fort Worth previously talked about parental involvement, parental engagement, but to your point, it's really about parental partnership. And she is leading that charge across the district, creating opportunities for our parents to engage in a parent university like program where they understand their role in learning, the importance of connecting with teachers, the kinds of questions they should be asking and attending at the parent-teacher conferences, kind of the social capital piece that is necessary for many parents who need that kind of guidance, particularly in some of our lower income and economically disadvantaged and language minority student populations. So we're very excited about that work there. And again, the whole idea of the concept of listen, learn, and then lead. So often we have this historical perspective where we'll swoop into a neighborhood and tell them what they need. We have decades and decades and decades of experience knowing that doesn't work. That we can learn as much from our parents as they can learn from us. There needs to be a two-way flow of information. And I applaud that perspective and paradigm that is being embraced by Read Fort Worth. And quite frankly, it aligns very closely to what we believe in Fort Worth ISD.
Well, I just want to validate that approach of listening to parents. We held focus groups at the 8 elementary schools that we worked in last year to invite parents who had children who were chronically absent to come in and help us understand why that was happening. And we had a mother of 2 chronically absent kids who came in to have this conversation with us. And at the end of the conversation, she just shared her deep gratitude for the school and Read Fort Worth. Listening to what her barriers were, finding solutions to that, and then helping to implement those.
That's great.
And as Read Fort Worth, we thought that was going to be a strategy to gather information, to co-develop what the solutions would be, and we found out that just those conversations themselves directly impacted the attendance rates in the following weeks at those schools. So it wasn't just a tool to gather information to inform strategies. Listening to parents, coming up with solutions co-developed by them is a strategy in and of itself to increase attendance. So
Excellent.
We just validate the work that you're doing to lift up parent voice and the importance of parents in all of our work. We had another question related to Proposition A, the tax ratification election. Just wanted to hear from you quickly about how Fort Worth ISD will establish the funding distribution of those three areas of safety, teacher quality, and then connectivity.
We had addressed this a number of times during the campaign, and it's a great question. When we look at public school districts, we understand we're in the people business, right? 85% of a district's expenditure is in people. We have 5,600 teachers. We have 10,000 total employees. So we understand that overwhelmingly, and I think the average percentage district-wide, districts across the nation in Texas, is about 85 to 87% of those expenditures are on people. So likely it'll be a similar investment. As I shared earlier, the other very positive thing about the passage of the TREs, it not only unlocks $44 million locally, but also those dollars are matched by the state, approximately $22 million. I think those numbers will vary based on assessed valuation across the district, but roughly $66 million, and the lion's share of those will go to our incentive programs to get our best teachers in front of our students. Right now, we're thinking in the first rollout, about 50% of those would be to teacher compensation, and then the other two buckets, safety, health and security, and connectivity, the remaining 25% portions. However, once you get our safety and security to an acceptable standard, it's our expectation that we'll be able to reallocate those dollars moving forward. Those dollars will be part and earmarked, but part of the overall budget that the board will consider every year. We just feel very grateful that we're able to address these issues of teacher compensation, teacher incentives as the lion's share, and then address safety, health and security, and connectivity and devices moving forward.
Our audience will be familiar with the term summer slide. That's certainly common parlance in education. It's something that Read Fort Worth has worked to combat since our first days with our Summer Scholars Collaborative.
Right.
The city of Fort Worth and their Camp Connects programs are big partners in that. And this year we saw that 100% of the kids in those programs either maintained or gained literacy from the start of the program to the end of program. And while summer slide has been common, we're now hearing kind of this COVID slide piece too. What do you think are going to be the critical strategies at the district to help get kids back on level?
Well, we know what works. And when we look at our leadership academies that are having success, it's high quality teaching, as you said, the high quality teacher, and more time on task. So I think when we are able to get all of our students back in person, that will be the first step. But I think extending the school day, and perhaps some of those incentives can go toward that, using technology or having in-person after-school programs, tutoring, small group, individual learning in the afternoons, in the evenings, in the weekends, and that's why raising those additional funds are so important to compensate high-quality teachers to do that work. For example, if we look at a day in some of our leadership academies, it's your standard 8 to 3 instruction with after-school programming that takes place. Actually, the school day does not end at 3, it ends at 4, with an extra hour of reading and mathematics embedded into the school day. And then the after-school program takes place, which is one-on-one tutoring, which is enrichment, which is fine arts, which is athletics. Dinner is then served thanks to Rainwater and their support of the after-school program, and then the school bus comes and kids go home at 5:45 p.m. So it's keeping schools on campus in a safe place with high-quality teachers and investing in them as the assets that they are, and that's really where I think we can shorten that time period based on the time loss as a result of the pandemic. We don't want to be in a 4-year waiting period like New Orleans after Katrina. I think in Fort Worth we can respond much quicker than that.
Great. Well, we appreciate our partnership with the district and the leadership of you and your team and all your campus principals, and again, those teachers that we really want to make sure we're lifting up here today. As Read Fort Worth continues this academic year, we are committed to our partnership with you and the district, and continue to work diligently to make sure that we are doing all that we can to make sure that kids are getting on grade level, and that any learning loss that has occurred is corrected as quickly as possible, again, so that we're not looking at a 4-year timeline here. Our strategic priorities this year will continue in our attendance work, making sure that we are reducing chronic absenteeism, both in-person strategies and virtual strategies. Our porch visit work is going to continue, as we know that there are just some families that need additional supports to make sure that their family is whole, and that those primary caregivers can be that teacher and primary caregiver, primary teacher of their children. And we're going to continue our work, our extended learning work, our Summer Scholars Collaborative that has worked to reduce summer slide, and that we're looking at extending that into other out-of-school spaces to make sure that anytime a kid is outside of a classroom, that it is a literacy enriching experience for them, and that we're using those other hours of the day, as you mentioned, to make sure that they are filled with academic content so that kids are staying on pace and on level. And then we're doubling down as Read Fort Worth in the teacher quality piece, and our board is really stepping up to take that on alongside you and your team and lifting up excellent teachers, having a robust teacher designation system that evaluates teacher performance and then connects that to making sure that we are rewarding teachers that are doing excellent work for families and kids. And our call to action to the group would be that is watching us here today would be to join us in this work. There's plenty of ways to get involved with us, and Read Fort Worth will be following this up by the end of the week with an email that invites you to get involved in any of these 3 ways that seem to be most fitting to you. And again, while we don't want to underscore the big challenges that are in place for our kids and our families and our teachers and the district, we do see a lot of reason to be hopeful. And with the continued dedication and commitment of leaders that are in this district, that are on this call today in our Fort Worth community, it feels like Fort Worth is the right place to be if we're going to tackle these issues for kids. And so we are proud to work alongside the district in this community, and we think there's no better place to do this than right here in Fort Worth. And so we give our great appreciation and thanks to you. We are proud of the Literacy Accord and that partnership agreement that we will be working forward with you. And also on the Don Babers Reading Rewards program that we're going to announce, that we have announced with our elementary schools to really double down on the attendance, enrollment, and literacy connection and the criticality of that. So we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Superintendent Scribner, for your time. We appreciate you being here today. And a huge thank you to all of our stakeholders who make this work possible for us and do this work alongside us. As Superintendent Scribner mentioned, we are a collective impact organization with the belief that everybody has expertise to bring to be a part of our solution to this common goal of 3rd grade reading, and we will accomplish it with you, our Fort Worth community. And again, there's no better place to do this work than Fort Worth. So thank you.
Great, thank you.